Hi, how are you? We're going to do something a little bit different today. I've got some things on my list, different points around business English that I hope will help answer some of your questions, clarify things, but most of all, give you a little bit of a confidence boost. Let's crack on then, shall we? Hello and welcome back to Confident Business English. You're here with me, Anna, your neuro language coach. If you love the podcast, you should definitely join as a free member. You're going to get the transcripts, the newsletter, and lots of extra content. Link to join in the show notes. Right then, let's get on with it. And as I said, this is going to be a slightly different type of episode because I want to give a bit of space to touch on some smaller topics that don't need a whole episode, but I think could be really useful and that you might want to hear about. First on the list, let's talk about emails and writing. I had a client the other day who sent me this beautifully worded email. It was somebody who had left a company and they were sending a goodbye email or whatever. And they forwarded it to me and they were like, I want to write like that. It was funny because when I read the email, I was like, wow, that's got AI written all over it. I was like, even I couldn't come up with that. It was so nicely worded. Maybe this is a controversial opinion, but from me, email writing is important, of course, especially if you do a lot of your communication over email. There are so many tools available to you now. I'm not sure how much it's worth investing the time to write beautifully and the time that it's going to take you to craft a beautifully worded email. Is it really worth it? If you do want to write your emails from scratch and you want a framework for how to do that, I highly recommend Chris Fenning's book, Effective Emails. Really simple, really straightforward, and it's just going to help you come up with those emails by yourself. In a different scenario, I have another client who works in sales and they have to reach out to people a lot on LinkedIn. And they were like, oh, do you know what, Anna, I hate my reach out email. She's like, it's just too formal, it's too stuffy, it looks like it's been written by AI, it's not very engaging. And actually in that approach, we just decided to strip it back, keep it really simple and conversational. And actually what I see is that in order to stand out against AI, you almost have to sound simpler and more basic because AI tends to make things sound quite formal. And I don't know about you, but in my experience, just a touch unnatural at times. So those are my points about emails. Is it really worth learning how to craft a beautiful email, or can you use the tools to your advantage? Because it's going to save you a lot of time as well. Let's be honest, you're really, really busy. On the other hand, there are cases where just a simple and more straightforward approach work better. I don't know whether you agree with me or not, but those are my thoughts on the matter that I wanted to share with you today. Let's cross that off and move on to the next one. So I have another client who was doing a presentation the other week, a really good presentation. They were explaining about the market in Spain and it was about 15-20 minutes. We recorded it. I do this with a lot of my clients because it's a great tool for improvement. Because it's one thing for me to give you feedback, but if you can watch it, horrible. I mean, everybody hates doing it really, but if you can watch and listen to yourself back, you can hear the feedback, if that makes sense. They watched it and the week after they said, well, you know, I was happy with it, but I feel like I had a lot of filler sounds. Filler sounds, by the way, are things like, or whatever. When I was actually listening to her presentation, I really didn't pick up on it that much because for me, it wasn't distracting. And honestly, overall, it maybe would have been about 10 or 11 filler sounds in 20 minutes. And this is the thing that I threw back to them. 20 minutes is a long time, even for me. I would have to be so disciplined to not have any filler sounds in 20 minutes. Filler sounds for me are only a problem if they are distracting. But a few filler sounds here and there are absolutely normal, especially if you're in situations where you're a little bit more nervous. Let's say, for example, an interview. If you haven't prepared something, they're gonna pop up. However, I would say that if you're doing a specific presentation, maybe it's a pitch, and you really want it to be slick and smooth, that could definitely be one area where you might want to try and reduce the filler sounds if you can. How do you do it? you kind of just have to force yourself to stop speaking at the end of sentences because they normally pop up in the transitions between one sentence to another. In an ideal world, nobody would use filler words and we'd all have the perfect presentation mode. But let's be honest, we're human beings. We can't always just churn out perfect presentations every single time. Perhaps your goal is, okay, I'm not even thinking about filler sounds. I just need to think about getting across this message and then I'm done. Great, that's fine. Equally, if you're maybe a little bit further along and you're more comfortable with the wording, you don't have to think about it so much, this could be a point for delivery that you could work on to improve. All right, let's cross this one off and move on. This is just a super quick one. I was with one of my clients the other day and they were given a presentation about a project that they had worked on. And I asked them this question. I said, how come you decided to do it like that? And they were like, what? Well, they didn't say what. They were like, excuse me. They said it in a much more polite way than that. But my question was, how come you decided to do it like that? And they were like, no, I don't get that question. I was like, good one to talk about on the podcast. How come is just another way to ask why. How come we're over budget? Why are we over budget? How come John isn't coming to the meeting tomorrow? Why isn't John coming to the meeting tomorrow? What's the difference? Well, it's just a little bit more informal, but you can feel confident if somebody asks you a question with how come, what they're asking you is why. Let's cross that one off and move on to the last thing on my list. This last one is about trying to challenge your perspectives about how you speak English. I'm going to play you a clip by a communications expert called Holly Weeks. This is a clip of her speaking at a conference, an event a few years ago now. And I actually came across this clip a while ago, but I sent it to a few of my clients and they were like, that's a really useful perspective to have. Holly is from the US and that's important because that's what she talks about in the clip. And the clip is called Advice for Non-Native Speakers. Have a listen and see what you think.
That Americans are so grateful that you bother to speak English at all. That we are not, it's just like, thank you. You also know that Americans don't necessarily prefer perfect English. We like street talk. So our bar is not high. And I teach at the Kennedy, I'm not berating Americans. I'm incredibly charmed by this. I was an English major. I can do better. But I love this about my culture, where we are interested in what people have to say. We're content-driven, not phraseology-driven. In fact, most people, and you know this too, Dahlia, because you see this with others who speak a different language poorly, they're translating it in their head, and then they're fixing it in their head, and it's boring. And I can't even get the idea. So we would much rather have an error-ridden phrase, an error-ridden hour of phrasing that we get the content to, than a long, slow, painful struggle for articulation when actually we're doing better as listeners than that. So it's not that I'm not sympathetic. It's that I don't honor it. I don't respect it as a barrier. And I would like it to go down. Certainly you have seen classmates or in some other setting, people who just, often in more casual conversation, they just stopped thinking about it. They were so caught up in what they were saying. And sure enough, there were errors in the language, but sure enough, people were fine.
I absolutely love that, and maybe that's something that you needed to hear today, but I think it's just a really good reminder. My favorite quote is, we're content-driven, not phraseology-driven. I'm interested in what you have to say, not in how sophisticated you make it sound or the language necessarily. I just want to know what you're talking about, your expertise, your idea, whatever it is. If you want to listen to the full clip, go to the link in the description box. And again, that was Holly Weeks, a communication expert. She's also got a book called The Failure to Communicate: How Conversations Go Wrong and What You Can Do to Right Them. That sounds really interesting. I haven't read it myself, but I'm definitely going to add that to my Kindle reading list. Might be something you're interested in as well if you have difficult conversations at work. So there you go. Those are my things on the list today. my perspective on writing, emails, how come as another question for why, and a reminder that simple and straightforward often wins the day. Thanks so much for squeezing me into your busy schedule as always. It was great to be with you, and I will see you again next week. Bye-bye.